So in this vlog, I wanted to share with you, my fellow board gaming enthusiasts, my impression of Masters of the Universe Clash for Eternia. Now, I've been playing the core box. I'm going to get to the expansions, but this time I tried to exercise a little bit of self-control, and I'm going to be going core and then adding in the expansions as opposed to just piling everything together right from the start. And in exploring this, of course, the ultimate question, and this is true of any board gaming review, what place would this game have in my collection? Is this a title that I'm going to regularly play? Is it something that I'm going to play with my friends or at the gaming club? Or is it going to sit there on the shelf with good intentions and just taunt me? Is it going to be able to capture and fuel my expectations? And of course, layered over this are board gaming questions like replayability, tactics, narrative, the immersion of the game, and just how does it play? Now, with an IP-based game, we've got kind of two things going on. We've got a rule set trying to deliver a narrative, and then we've also got a very well-defined IP. So depending on your relationship to Masters of the Universe, if it's something that you really, really love and are a part of, or is it something that you kind of know of, that's naturally going to influence the game. I tried to separate myself a little bit from that because certainly we have all of our favorite titles, and I love Masters of the Universe. And I have to say, this was a big draw for me to be able to play those classic characters, and quite frankly, to be able to recite certain lines back and forth as we play the game. But I say that as a framework in that if you play an IP game that you really, really like, it's easy to overlook certain parts of the rules. It's easy to say, well, okay, it's not as tight with the rule set, or maybe it's not as fun, and you kind of put that aside. I wanted to jump in to the rules because my thought was how it plays. If it's solid, that's going to make the IP even more amazing. And if it's solid, even if I'm not quite into the IP, I mean, I know Masters of the Universe, I know kind of what's going on there, then it's a solid title and it'll be a lot of fun. But I don't want to say the IP didn't influence me. Now, in exploring that, second, production value. Well, production value is actually really, really good. And I think this is two things. I think it's one, partnering with Mattel with a certain IP, with He-Man. It's got to present really, really well, Masters of the Universe. But also, I think just the production value as things go on with board games, we expect more. It's kind of like back in the day when you're paying for a data plan on your phone. At some point, you started getting those data plans for free, and everybody else had to jump in and offer them for free. So as we see the evolution of board games, things that didn't exist or things that were premium are now kind of standard. So within the game, the cards are vibrant. The artwork is true to the IP. The artwork on the primary cards for both the players playing one side and the controller, which is kind of an overlord playing it, they're really big. They're vibrant. The dice are solid. The little energy cubes are solid. The colors on the board certainly fit Eternia, but they pop really, really well. And the detail of the miniatures is very, very good. If I had one gripe, because look, it's great to play games and we love playing games, but it's just as fun to gripe about them. I would have liked to see slightly bigger miniature sizes, maybe a little bit more heroic size. This would have, of course, it's a hex-based game, so it would have scaled the board a little bit more, but I could see how maybe that wasn't possible with production costs to keep it at a price point, because there is a decent amount of miniatures in the core game and the expansions. So to go full heroic size, maybe like Nemesis size for some of the aliens, that would be a little bit hard. I understand that, but the detail for the miniatures is fantastic. So what this means is if you're going to paint them up, it's going to look even more amazing. But if you just want to play them straight out of the box, it really pulls you in to that narrative. Now, let's talk about the rules. I'm not going to get into the crunchiness of the rules and how they play out, because certainly there's a lot of other YouTube videos that are going to show you how to play the game. The rules are pretty straightforward. You play a couple of games and you grasp them pretty quick. What I really like about this game at its core, it's a skirmish-based game. It's a skirmish-based miniature game. It happens to play through Masters of the Universe, Eternia, He-Man, Skeletor, and all of our favorites. But how does it do that? The two things that it does really well for a miniature skirmish-based game. The first is you're never truly knocked out. And I really think this is important when you're playing with a smaller group of models and especially a number of players playing an individual model. It's one thing if I'm flying 10 TIE fighters and I have a bad turn and 3 get taken out, I'm still in the game. It's another thing if you're playing a skirmish-based game and you get taken out, and in many older relic and legacy skirmish-based games, when you lose miniatures or you lose your model, you're done. You're knocked out. So what am I going to do? Hang out till the next round? I love that you get knocked out, but then you get to respawn and come back. That's an interesting concept. Now, it makes sense from the IP because you get beat up, you're not going to get killed, you get back up. But there's a penalty. It's not just let me throw myself in there and I take 6 wounds and I die, no big deal, I'm up next turn. You are. But positioning is key. There's a lot of different missions. Positioning is key. You respawn back at your spawn point. And depending on the mission, there's a couple of different spawn points. So getting killed knocks you out and there's consequences, but you're not completely knocked out of the game. I think that is very, very important, especially a game where we're playing with multiple players. If I'm sitting down with 3 or 4 other players, we want to be active. We want to be engaged. I don't want someone knocked out in the first 20 minutes and then they hang out. So I love that you get to respawn. The other thing that is extremely interesting is random turn order, or I should say not random, because you do get to control it and influence it, hidden turn order. The way the game begins is, depending on the number of players, you have small cards representing your character, both as the controller or as playing the other side. You decide amongst yourselves, or as the controller, you kind of decide what you're going to play, and you put these cards down, face down on a track, on an initiative track. And there's also a health track and a power meter that talks about escalation. And then who goes first? You flip the first card. That miniature, or if it's the controller, activates minions, and they get to move. You then flip the next card, and you get assigned energy that you get to spend based on your position of the card. So if you go first, this is where you have to make some tactical decisions. If you get to go first, you're going to act first, but you're going to get less energy. If you delay your action, you're going to potentially get more energy. And what's really cool about this is it's not just the predictable I go, you go. So we're playing a skirmish-based miniature game. You move your models, like you shoot, you use some powers, you do some rerolls. Okay, it's my turn, I get to go. You're engaged the whole time, because what I find is I'm playing man-at-arms, and I know I'm going fourth on the track because that's where we put the card down. So I'm sitting there, okay, turn 1, who's probably going to activate? And they're going to move here. Turn 1, maybe they activate. Turn 2, who's activating? Oh, I didn't think Evil Lynn was going to activate turn 2. Okay, she's going to move here, interact here, attack here. Well, now that changes this. You're constantly calculating and recalculating. And that's interesting because it pulls you into the game. You're going to have to wait till it's your turn to make the best possible decision that you can. I really love this hidden activation, this revealed activation. Plus, it's a lot of fun to see who's going where or doing when. Now, let's talk about the power system, because we are talking about Eternia. We're talking about Masters of the Universe. Everyone's got mad powers and individual powers. How do we pull that out onto a tabletop game? I mean, essentially, you're playing characters with superpowers. When you activate, you gain energy cubes, depending on the turn that you activate and maybe on certain conditions. You take these cubes and you get to put them on different power tracks of abilities that you can use. And as the game escalates, you gain more and more cards with more and more power. So over time, over the course of the game, this idea of leveling up, you become a lot more powerful. So you go from kind of beginning to end. When you use a power, and it could be attack, it could be a reroll, it could be a defensive action, meaning you're attacked, so after you're attacked, you get to do this. You determine how you want to spend that power. So you've got some certainly some dice-based mechanics where things are going to happen, and you can kind of manipulate the dice with re-rolls and figuring out, okay, if I'm rolling 3 dice to attack, if I spend 2 additional power, assuming I have it, then I can boost it to 5 dice. And then if I spend 2 more power as a reaction and he misses, I get to re-roll. Nothing comes free. You can jack yourself up super power, but you're going to burn through that power. You have better spent a turn or 2 saving it. So you have the dice mechanics, which I enjoy, which inject that randomness. But at the same time, for those who really like kind of that control, a more card-based game where you're figuring out power and allocating and where I'm going to spend it and how I'm going to spend it and what I'm going to do. That leads to some very, very interesting combos. And you can do what people would think in other games is extremely broken, right? That's broken. What do you mean you start out with 4 attacks, then you boost it to 3 more, then you get to do re-rolls, then it gets to ignore armor, and then it hits in a radius of 2. Like, that's broken, bro. And it's like, no, I had to level up and save all of my energy, all of my power for 3 turns to do this. Nothing is free. So it's a question of what opportunity do you see? Do you have the power? Do you save the power? Do you act now? I really, really like that. The other points of the game, which I think is absolutely fantastic, and this is also what I really, really loved, this idea of bringing a board game mechanic into the realities of this current environment. You've got He-Man, you've got Skeletor, you've got minions on both sides. Which side is good? Which side is bad? Now, back in the day, you'd only be able to play He-Man, and maybe the controller, the bad guy player, would play Skeletor. Both players can play both sides. So you can enjoy the missions from the perspective of He-Man. You can enjoy the missions from the perspective of Skeletor. It's a clash for Eternia. There is really no good or bad side. That's really, really interesting. You can further decide to hack the game. And even though it's not written in the rules, the mechanics absolutely support it. And do kind of team-ups where you could have Skeletor and He-Man on the same team fighting the Horde for some reason. So this idea of like drafting your team and selecting your characters and not being limited to good or bad, that's really, really interesting. So that right there in terms of replayability and just coolness factor, that was a big pull for me. The other aspect is the system itself has an AI system. So the game is set up where one side controls a hero each, and then the other side is a single player controlling minions and controlling whether it's the He-Man or Skeletor. But there's also a solo AI mode, and it works pretty well. It does what it's supposed to do. It's never going to replace a player. It's not as sophisticated as an app, but I like the idea that it is analog based and it's built in the game. So I'm completely removed and divorced from an app. I don't have to worry about updates or it not working. But the fact that you can play the game, that you can play this game, good side or bad side, mix and match as possible, play with your friends, play solo, that's huge. That goes into replayability tremendously. Now let's end with the missions, of course, because it's Clash for Eternia, and while there isn't a campaign per se, it's like watching the various media and TV shows, right? One side's trying to gain some power over the other, crack in and break into Castle Grayskull and do what you got to do. So there's different missions like recovering lost relics, running around and exploring and recovering these lost relics. There's missions where you've got to escort NPCs to a certain area. There's missions where you have to recon and kind of capture points. There's skirmish-based missions where you have to break through. There's a lot of missions in the core game. So now, when we have all the different ways to level up your character and all the different combos and powers that you can use, plus playing one side mix or match or one side over the other, plus playing AI, plus all of the missions, and this is at core release, we're not getting into expansions yet. We're not getting into additional content that's going to be released. We're not getting into the inevitable fan content that's going to be coming out. I have to say that this game has possibly the most replayability out of all the titles in my collection. So playing this game has been a great experience so far. Admittedly, I'm into the Masters of the Universe thing, but even if I put that aside, even if I was going to totally put that aside and just play with some different miniatures and take the system itself, it works really, really well. And it embraces a lot of the things, I would say all of the things we expect in a modern board game. And because of that, each experience is not only unique, but each experience is entertaining. Each mission is entertaining to the absolute end. So how does that answer for you? How does that answer for you? Is this a title that you purchase? Is this a title that sits on your shelf and taunts you? For me right now, the place that it occupies is I bring it to play with my friends that we know Masters of the Universe. We pick our characters. We've got our lines memorized. We kind of taunt each other as we go and we play. Layered that experience over a fantastic rule set, absolutely worth the price of admission. Second to this, I've been bringing it to the board gaming club as kind of a pick up and play type game, and it works. People kind of know He-Man somewhat, and even if they don't, the rules, the miniatures, the artwork, everything's engaging. After one round of play, you understand completely what's going on, completely, and you jump into the game. So I find it working really, really well on both of those levels.